Hello, and welcome to our third CCS Lounge. My name is Gerardo Aldana, and I have the privilege and pleasure of serving as the Dean of the college. The CCS Lounge is a virtual event. It's hopefully a toehold on the experience of being on campus amongst a vibrant community of scholars. We're aiming to simulate the kinds of conversations that often occur throughout the building, usually after talks or late after hours informally. In the lounge, we eliminate the talk and cut straight to the conversation. Today, we're talking about a theme that fits within a top priority for the college: diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are themes that we're addressing on all levels in society today, headlining national news, academic websites, local conversations. We're asking who is actually welcome, in what spaces, and what are the structures or the pressures that bring people into them or push them out. Today's conversation about women in science is about justice. And though it may not be on the forefront of every remark, I'm sure you'll be able to detect that within the discussion. I encourage you to follow the practice of my colleague in Chicano Studies, Chela Sandoval, who asks us to actively witness. She asks that we not sit back passively listening, but witness the experiences relayed in this conversation. This may assist us to move beyond talk and move towards action. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator today. We are so fortunate to be joined by Dr. Amber Kaplan. Dr. Kaplan took her BA in biology here in CCS in 2006, advised by Armand Curris. We saw Armand in the CCS Lounge on COVID a few months ago. After CCS, Dr. Kaplan went on to complete a PhD in biomedical sciences at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Then a postdoc in microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics at UCLA. And from there, within 5 years, she moved from academia into positions as Chief Business Officer and Chief Scientific Officer within industry, which is another theme we'll be addressing today, is that relationship between careers in the academy and in industry. Dr. Kaplan is probably well known around CCS already. She's honored us with her participation in our CBAS event, and you can check out our website for the story on CBAS if you aren't familiar with it. She's also participated in our 50th anniversary celebration. So I'm thinking we might as well make her an adjunct faculty member at this point. But now I'm pleased to hand the session over to Dr. Amber Kaplan, who's moderating our event today.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. I'm really excited to be here. I am very much a champion, fan, lifelong supporter of CCS. So I am in the best position today because I get to listen to all of these amazing women and ask them questions that I've always wanted to ask them and listen to their answers. So today is about listening to these panelists and you, the audience, and I invite everyone to really participate, say what comes to mind, go off the cuff. And it would be great if we were in a room together, maybe around like a nice little round table or outside in the woods around a fire. But we'll try to recreate that as much as is possible in a virtual environment. We're going to start by going around and asking our amazing panelists to introduce themselves. I will mirror their introductions really quickly. So thank you for talking about my education for me. I'm an immunologist, so my PhD was in immunology, and I have enjoyed a variety of positions since I moved into the biotech industry in a tiny startup, in venture capital, and also in growth stage and clinical stage companies. My current position is as the Chief Scientific Officer of Karma Biotechnologies. I make non-viral delivery solutions for especially immune cells, but all cell types. Very passionate about it. And something kind of fun about me that's a little bit different is I'm from Alaska, and that is Alaska in the background. And with that, I would love to invite our next panelist to please tell us about you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa Larson. So I graduated from CCS in 2008. So it feels like just yesterday, but actually was quite a while ago, I'm sure for some of you. So I was a major in chemistry, biochemistry. And after being in CCS, I actually decided to make the big move away from, beautiful Southern California, which is where I grew up and had spent the first 22 years of my life. And I actually moved to Boston to pursue a PhD in chemistry at MIT. So that was a really wonderful opportunity. I worked on actually looking at antiviral polymeric entities, which was really fun, very different from what I did my work at UCSB in. After that, I actually started a company with my advisor in sort of formulation development, which was a really great opportunity. I think, like Gerardo said, going into industry from PhD is a great thing that you can do. And I'm happy to talk more about that if you, want to get your PhD, but maybe don't want to become a professor. So that was a great opportunity. I did that for about 4 years. That company got acquired. So it was a fun opportunity to go through sort of a startup to acquisition to then working at a bigger pharmaceutical company. And kind of that transition made me really learn that I didn't necessarily want to work at a larger company and I wanted to get out of the lab. And so after that, I made a transition actually into the investment universe. And so kind of an unusual trajectory for most PhDs. But now I work at a company called RE Capital. We're a life science investment firm. And yeah, we basically are very data driven and we invest in biopharmaceutical companies like the one that Amber works at and others. And it's been a really, really interesting and wonderful kind of opportunity to still stay close to the science, but think about it from a different lens. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I'll say, we're supposed to talk about some anecdote. I would just like to say that when I was sitting here and watching those slides go by, and I heard Jack Johnson, it almost made me it made me feel a lot of feelings. Like I really miss Santa Barbara, and it just, I just wanted to kind of let everybody know that, Santa Barbara is such a special place, and I hope that you just really all cherish your time there because it's truly a wonderful, just a great university. So I miss it, and I hope that you guys are all enjoying it. So I'll stop there.
Hi, everyone. Happy Earth Day. I'm Kathy Foltz, and I'm a professor in molecular cell developmental biology. I found my way to UCSB by accident, and actually am a biologist by accident. I didn't start out in science. My PhD was at Purdue in Indiana, and that was where I fell in love with looking at cell division and thinking about how little organisms develop. And I've never lost my curiosity for that. And here at UCSB, I work on early cell cycle and developmental control. Let's see, fun fact about me. Well, I'm a lifelong academic, so that's not really a fun fact, unlike Amber and Alyssa, who had kind of a varied career. But I grew up on a small farm in Ohio, and I know how to milk cows. So that may be something that would surprise a lot of people. And I love cows too. So that's pretty much it for me till later.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everybody. My name is Milan Minsky, and I had the good fortune of doing a PhD at UCSB in the ECE department during an incredibly fruitful time. And I was able to work on materials for green and blue LEDs at that time. I have a lot of work experience, both at large companies with a research focus. And then for the past 17 or 18 years, I've been very much involved in the startup world. And so I've spent most of my time in that world. And so that's a very interesting set of experiences. Fun fact, I am the proud and happy parent of a CCS student who was born during my graduate work at UCSB and have had the wonderful opportunity to return to Santa Barbara several times during her experience there, and she'll be graduating this year. She went to the daycare at UCSB when she was a baby.
Okay, so I guess I'm next. I'm Susanna Scott. I'm a professor here at UC Santa Barbara in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and also in the College of Engineering in the Department of Chemical Engineering. Let's see. So I have been a bit peripatetic in my own career. I've been trained in a lot of different countries. I actually graduated from a university in Canada in chemistry many years ago, and came to the United States to do a PhD at Iowa State University in chemistry as well. Then I went to Europe and I was a postdoc in France before I came back to Canada. And I joined a French-speaking university, actually. So I taught in French I taught chemistry in French for many years, and then moved to UC Santa Barbara several years ago. It's been a really interesting and fascinating transition to see how science is done in different countries around the world, and to see how amazing it is here, the entrepreneurial spirit of the students and the faculty, and the enthusiasm that everybody has for their research here. I really love that part of it. So I don't know if this is a fun thing about me, but about a year ago, I share with you that I was approached and said to me, would you like to stand for election for the Academic Senate of the University of California, Santa Barbara? And I didn't know very much about the Academic Senate, but I do have a really hard time saying no to people. So I said, well, tell me more. And I learned a little bit about it, and I agreed to have my name on the ballot. And a few months later, I was elected, which surprised me. But you know what? 2 weeks after that, the university shut down, and it shut down for a year, and we're still shut down. And in the meantime, I've learned that the Academic Senate actually is incredibly important in running the university, and that this past year we've done an enormous amount to sort of keep things moving, keep things going. And I'm sure all of you have experienced that too. It's been a really interesting year, and we've had to pull together a lot to make it happen. So that's been my fun in the past year. Back to you, Amber.
Thank you so much. As long as you don't have a ton of background noise, I would invite all of our panelists to take their mute off. I found that it can help spur on some conversation. So we're here today to chat about our various experiences as women in science across two pretty big divides that I think we might have a shared goal of helping to bridge more and more in the future. So we are interested in learning more about the trajectories of women in academic science, of women in industry science, however that may look, and then whether or not they are in touch with the industry they don't, or the side of their science that they don't actually work in. So wanting to kick this off for this amazing panel with a fun question, especially when we kind of peek at our attendees here and realize that a lot of them are current students or recent undergraduate students. I'd like to pose to all of you, what advice would you give your younger self? What would you tell her about what you've done, what maybe you might have tried earlier, or what was just right?
I can start off.
Do you want to start?
Sure. I would just say that sometimes when students especially have asked me questions like that, one thing that always comes to mind right away is how grateful I am that I was able to find mentors along the way. And that even though I was pretty shy and sometimes was hesitant to reach out, it was in the cases where I was, sort of brave enough to seek that mentorship and try something new that it seemed to make all the difference. And I may not have realized it at that time, but in reflection, you realize that those times when you kind of step outside of your comfort zone are really when the big changes can happen. And so I think I lucked out in that regard. I wouldn't say I was smart enough to know that, but in retrospect, it worked out, and I'm super grateful for that, and have never forgotten those people who made that happened for me.
So Kathy, quick follow-up. What are a couple of characteristics of some of your most, let's call them favorite or successful mentees? What do you think are a couple of best practices for mentees wanting to find mentors or get maximum benefit out of mentors that they've identified?
Yeah, I think being very willing to talk openly about things you're concerned about and letting your mentor know, what is it that you're struggling with. I think a lot of times students especially want to try and convey that everything's going well and they kind of have it all together, but we all know that that's not true all the time, certainly not for me. And I think having honest conversations are where the real work gets done in terms of thinking about what a student needs. And also it's good for the mentor too. Honesty.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll piggyback off of that. I think, yeah, having mentors is an incredible way to help yourself advocate for what you want, right? When you're maybe new in your career, you might not know all the opportunities that could be out there for you. And so one, by identifying those folks who really have kind of an interest in making you do well, I think that can help you identify, what you're looking for. And then once you've identified that, yeah, I would just say, be brave, kind of jump into the deep end. I also feel, earlier in my career, I was much shyer about sort of asking about, is this okay? Instead of just kind of doing things. So, it comes with time. You can't just wake up one morning and become confident, but the more that you kind of push yourself into those opportunities and give yourself kind of the opportunity to be a little more kind of brave and outright, that's just going to help you grow. And so, I would encourage everybody to advocate for themselves and find mentors who can kind of help guide you through that process if maybe you're not as comfortable yet.
Thank you.
I'm thinking back to my first year at university and my first calculus midterm, which was a disaster, actually, because I'd never taken a calculus course before, and it was a total mystery. I didn't understand very much, and I failed that first midterm. I got my paper back, and it had a 45% on it or something. I was utterly dejected. And about a week later, the professor actually let slip that the average on that first midterm was under 30%. So what I didn't realize after I'd spent a week being totally miserable is that I actually did one of the best papers in the class. It's just that the whole class was a bit adrift. And it was the first time I think I realized that my own assessment of what I was capable of was really not well aligned with what everybody else thought I was capable of, right? The professor, I think, did this intentionally. He gave everybody a killer test just to make us all pay attention and realize how far we had to go. And the people who succeeded were the ones who took a deep breath and dug into the work and got to work and did it, right? And I ended the class with an A. But all along the way, I always thought I'm in this place with all these really smart people. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this and do as well as everybody else. Well, it turned out that I could, and I did. And sometimes I was actually much better than I thought I was. I think a lot of people at that age maybe have this same experience. You wonder, how competitive am I really? I'm in this place with all these incredible people. You belong here. You were selected for that exact reason, and you can do it. And the more experiences you have, the more you come to realize that you should have always had that confidence in yourself, but it takes time to build it. So be confident that you can do it, even if it's uncomfortable or difficult initially.
So I'll just add to all these great comments. I think, one thing that I think about is playing the long game, which is not something I originally thought about when I went into science and engineering. Nobody in my family had done science or engineering, and it was kind of a whole new world. So stumbling onto mentors during the process of undergraduate and graduate school was, it's not something I did deliberately, but it was amazing how well it turned out. I mean, I'm still in touch with the mentors that I encountered and kind of cultivated relationships with quite a while back. And it's just incredible how much that helps people kind of navigate all the things that are coming at them. Because a lot of things come at you and you really don't know in advance how things are going to go. So another thing I think I would tell myself is, let yourself be inspired. There's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of things that are tough and you have to get through them, but you have to keep your eye on, why you got into this in the first place. I was inspired originally by the original space race, which was way back. And, I kept that front and center. I originally wanted to go into aeroastro engineering at MIT. I was an undergrad at MIT. And I remember I would fall asleep in every single seminar that I went to on aeroastro because it was just so boring for me. But after that, I found other things that really inspired me. And so you find things that inspire you and you keep going. So
thank you. You guys have brought up a bunch of really, really important and I think valuable different topics. I kind of want to dig down a little bit in a few of them. So Alyssa, when you talk about the deep end of the pool and pushing yourself, is every direction that you push yourself in, does it work? Right? So if you're going to put yourself out there, what's the feedback, right? And this actually digs into what Susanna was talking about, and you as well, Milan. Susanna, you were saying trust that, or take it for given that you belong here, right? And that you are just as good as your peers. But what if some of the feedback you're getting in your environment is contrary to that, right? What do you do? Who do you listen to? Who do you not listen to? What are some indicators of a good mentor? Kathy, back to yours, and maybe not a good mentor.
Yeah. I think you need to create or find a safe space, right? Like you said, if you dive into the deep end and, you fail miserably, and sometimes, we all fail, right? It's not like everything's going to come out perfectly, but finding people who can give you feedback for, what went wrong, and being comfortable enough to have those candid conversations with folks who you do trust their opinion and trust that they are going to, be constructive. I think that's really helpful. And most mentors will be, right? And so from the standpoint of finding someone who you resonate, your personalities mesh and you resonate with kind of how they connect with you, and then people who are willing to give you feedback. I think that's really important. So that's what I would say to your question about at least kind of diving into the deep end, how do you know if it worked or if you failed? Yeah, it doesn't always work. That's why, taking chances feels hard because it's not 100% success rate, but being able to have people help you understand, what went wrong. So the next time you do it, you can be successful, I think is really important.
Thank you. So, we've got lots of questions and we've got lots of places to go. I really think, Susanna and Milan as well, that a couple of the things that you touched on is so key. And if I could have had this conversation with my younger self, that would have been very helpful. So could you speak a little bit more, Susanna, about how you've evolved as a scientist, someone who went from not feeling like you belong there potentially, right? Not understanding how you really were a lot better than you thought you were, right? And then beyond that, later in your career and today as a member of the academic senate, where are you in that hierarchy? Or does the hierarchy even exist anymore? Right? Are you just this, amazing cosmic person who's not even in a kind of a hierarchy anymore? Do you still compare yourself is what I'm asking.
It's a good question. You know, I think as I get further along in my career, I compare myself less and less. And not everybody does this, but if you can, I think it's really healthy. You have to believe in yourself and in your own value, and less in what other people value in you. I think it's really important to be authentic. We see around us people who we think are very successful, and we try to emulate them. But I don't think anybody should try to emulate people that they don't really resonate with, right? You don't emulate just because somebody is famous or successful. You have to have, deep-seated values and keep that with you. And so I think now today, I try not to compare myself. I just believe that if I want to do something, I can do it. And I'm not afraid to say, I don't understand. Please explain to me. I have work to do. I need help. All of those things we all do. And they're not admissions of failure. They're just steps along the way. So we just have to be authentic, I think.
Amber, if I could just add to that, because I've heard this amongst this conversation before too, the idea that confidence itself is gendered, right? So that we do walk into spaces where, men often don't question themselves and just plug ahead and whether they fail or not, keep going. And that doesn't always happen when women enter, especially science. And I think that one of the reasons I want to bring it up is that we've had an entire event built around inspiration from a woman scientist, Carol Greider, come give a keynote address and talk about her resume of failures, right? She discussed how many things went wrong, yet she was able to persevere. And our undergraduate student in biology, Vivian Huang, took that to heart and turned it into an actual space for folks to talk about, like, okay, what does it mean to fail and to move on? And who gets to move on? Who decides that they have the confidence to do it or not? I think those are the themes that come out really poignantly to me in this conversation.
Yeah, Susanna, I really appreciate your comment about not comparing yourself to other people, and that ties into what Gerardo's saying with regard to, I think students frequently talk about the so-called imposter syndrome. Do I belong here? And you particularly hear that in the sciences, I think. And I think those kinds of conversations and talking about that, and we sort of a joke in classes sometimes is, you'll do a poll and ask who feels that way, and it's like 95% of the class. And so if everyone feels that way, is anyone an imposter? So we try to unpack that a little bit and talk about it. But I think it was Alyssa who mentioned the safe spaces, the places where you can talk about these things without the fear or the uncertainty that somebody's going to judge you for having self-doubts or for feeling like you don't belong. And I think creating those spaces is really, really important, particularly for young scientists and young women scientists. And I think the more we can do that just as a matter of course, it doesn't have to be like a special event, right? You just begin to build this into your teaching, into your training of your students in your lab. And I think eventually that kind of works its way through the whole system. I remember in graduate school, I was in a pretty large biology department, and there were very few women faculty, and none of them had families. And that was really kind of a problem for me. I wasn't really sure what that meant. And I kind of just ignored it when I was a graduate student. I really didn't think about it very much. And it wasn't until much later in my career, and I reflected back on that, how challenging that was. But at the time, I didn't let myself think of it as a challenge, right? Because I just wanted to do my science, and I was so into my stuff. And it was a really tough environment because there weren't many women around. And I think, students tell us they're looking for mentors who resonate with them. And a lot of times that means it's, the same gender or the same ethnicity or the same background. And when you don't have a lot of that, it can be difficult to find mentors. And I think that's where a lot of women in science actually do a lot of hidden work with mentoring students, because, all of the young women in their field will come to them if there's not that many women to choose from, right? So I think all of that kind of plays into what both Susanna and Gerardo said.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kathy, quick question. Were you consciously modeling when you brought, or when your husband brought your child to your lectures?
No, that was
I'm going to show students that it's okay
No.
to have a family.
No, that was a mix-up, and he was supposed to pick up the kid. So Amber tells the story better than me, but yeah, I mean, ended up meeting little kids in the classroom. And I think one time, you know, I think how many times did I lecture with, you know, spit on the back of my shirt and I didn't know it, you know, I mean, you have all those kinds of things, but more than one person, I mean, but particularly Amber commented on that, oh my gosh, my professor has children. Like, well, yeah,
it was huge for me. You were one of 2 female professors that I had, and it was huge for me to see that. I remember that day. And I have 3 children now. So, you know, that was a big deal.
Well, that kid is starting law school now, so time flies.
Yes, he is, isn't he? That's awesome. You know, we are going to jump into a couple more things and questions from the audience. But before we do that, Milan, I've been percolating on what you said about inspiration. And if you would allow me, I'd love to kind of pull out a little more there. So you said the space race. But was that the only inspiration? Did the inspirations change throughout your career? Did you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it really was a huge inspiration, Amber. I mean, I remember watching the Apollo liftoff with my parents in Iowa. I was actually living in Iowa. And it was an incredible experience for all of us. We had emigrated from India. And to be able to watch that was just, I still remember it. So it was, you know, that inspirational. But over time, as I said, you know, your inspirations do change. And I just wanted to add a little bit of the engineering perspective, maybe from, you know, not just science, but engineering. I think it was Prince Philip, who's recently passed away, who said that engineering is one of the few disciplines that allows you to better the human condition. I mean, science does that too, but engineering does it in a very applied and practical way. And so I think, you know, drawing inspiration from, as I mentioned, I was fortunate enough to work on the early days of LEDs, and that has led to LEDs in everyday lighting and a lot of energy savings, and think, you know, something that may ultimately impact climate change. And we didn't perhaps know that at that time, but, you know, people working in that field have had potentially that kind of impact. So I think inspiration can come from a lot of different places. And yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly.
Yeah, you are.
I've drawn inspiration from a lot of different places. So
yeah, and I love that. I think that many of us, that would resonate, right? There's inspiration, and it helps to drive us even when things are tough. So we have a panelist who has just arrived. Her name is Leah. Hi, Leah. We're so glad you're here. One of the cool things about this group is that we are different ages, we're in academia, we're in industry, we're on the West Coast, we're on the East Coast, and we are also in Europe. So Leah, we are going to take some questions from the audience, but first, would you just quickly give us a little background on your education, you know, what you're doing right now, and maybe a fun anecdote about yourself?
Okay. Hi, my name is Leah. I graduated from UCSB CCS in 2020, so less than a year ago. So as for my education, that's mostly it. I'm currently a first year PhD student at the University of Oxford. So I really miss Santa Barbara. The weather here today was the first sunny day we've had in a month, I think, like really sunny day in the UK. An anecdote, I didn't come prepared with an anecdote.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We've got some questions popping up. So I think if all of our panelists are amenable, should we use the rest of our time to see what people want to talk about? Okay,
Yeah.
well, coming in hot. Here we go.
Oh,
Okay.
I'll add two more things. Sorry, I completely forgot. I majored in computing and physics in the College of Creative Studies, and now I'm researching quantum computing, quantum computer architecture, math, category theory, and natural language processing. Very different things, but yeah.
You know, just 4 things in one, that's all. Okay, so, ooh, Leah, you are perfect for this. Did you ever have moments where you wanted to make big pivots in your career, and how did you make those decisions? How did you go from your undergrad courses of study to now what you're doing in grad school?
Okay. I don't know if it would be considered a big pivot given that I'm just started grad school and I don't know exactly, I'm not very deep into my career yet. But I would say one of the biggest pivots I made was when I first came to UCSB to CCS, I was a computing major and I was interested in auditing the CCS physics course. And I just wanted to sit in on the course. And I found out that Professor Satya Goswami said I would have to, there's no auditing allowed of the course. And she asked and encouraged me to double major. And at the time, that was so alien to me because I hadn't known what physics was before 12th grade. And so that was probably the biggest pivot I've made in my life, to just take that on the spot, just consider, like, could I see myself as a physicist, even though before 12th grade, I just never knew what physics was. So that was a really big pivot. And now I'm researching physics at a graduate level now in quantum computing. So I think that's a really big pivot. It's not so much how I made the decision on the spot, but I've definitely questioned whether I was a good fit or what was suitable whenever trying something new like that. And I think eventually I found my place. There's more to that, but yeah, I think that's my answer.
Thank you. That's wonderful. So I have a cool question here, and they're all cool questions, but this one's got like a couple different sentences to it. So given that the number of women in any particular STEM discipline is rather small, it seems that campus-wide or profession-wide support groups might assume greater importance. Do such groups exist, and are they effective? I would like to put that to the group, and depending on what you guys come up with, I can add to it if need be. So maybe we should start on the academic side and then go to the industry side. Does that work for you, ladies? Okay.
There's certainly many support groups. Just on our own campus, we have women in science and engineering. And then within, different departments, women will get together sort of unofficially as well. And then in our professional organizations, there are frequently ways to have support groups or focus group types of things. So I would say that that's a pretty easy access in terms of seeking out specific groups.
But how do you find out about them, Kathy, if you're a student and you're not sort of aware?
Yeah, I would say as a student and you're not really aware, sort of asking around from other students, but also your professors who might know about it. I think that's a good way to do that. So.
Also plug for student affairs.
Yeah.
I would say, support groups are great for some people. They don't appeal to everybody, and that's fine. Everybody needs to find what they need. But because in some fields, women are quite rare, I think computer science is a really difficult one right now. I would say, men, step up. You need to mentor too. Okay, and I have had some wonderful men mentors as well as women in my career. It's just a question of finding someone that you feel comfortable talking to, who is prepared to listen. But we all need to share this burden.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed, Susanna. Thank you so much for bringing up that. Allyship is huge for any important cause you want to further.
Can I throw a link in chat? It's a blog post I wrote on the UCSB Undergrad research blog 2 years ago, and it links to, it has a long list of student organizations that I had the pleasure of being a part of or working with when I was a student, and I found it was really valuable. It's not a comprehensive list, but I think it will mention a lot of the groups more associated with women in STEM, as well as other underrepresented groups as well. I think I'll just put it in chat.
Yeah, Leah, will you dump that into the chat?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
I do think that such groups exist, and I think that UCSB is really supportive, at least. So I guess I was a co-founder of Women Hacks, which is the female identifying and non-gender binary hackathon on campus. And I was just really blown away by how the vision for it it started off as a Google Doc by myself and another student, and it just became what it is today. We had Women Hacks 3.0 just last week. And it was mind-blowing that I don't know the statistics for this year, but for last year's Women Hacks, 1/3 of the students attending were humanities and arts majors, and only 1/4 of them were computer science and computer and engineering majors. So 3/4 were not from these disciplines. And so people who were able to code for the very first time and just the start of the weekend, by the end of the weekend, have a project to show. And whether that was a beginner category or advanced category. And so just realizing that, and the support that we've gotten from CCS, from other departments on campus, and from local companies and larger companies that make this possible, I think there's something really special.
Yeah, that's kind of going back to that, like advocating for yourself. And if the group doesn't exist, make it,
Yes.
Find a safe space, get your colleagues together, male or female, and, create that group and that support. I'll just add for industry, there are definitely professional support groups as well, and organizations like there's Women in Bio, which I'm a member of. They host really useful like mentor groups, and also just kind of networking, because what's one thing you'll find, and I think this is not unique to industry, but networking can be very helpful and important as you kind of continue your path. And so yeah, I think if you can like Google and find a lot of these things, ask around, or just literally do a Google search for your discipline and professional group or support group, and I think you'll find it, because there a lot of people out there like to meet with like-minded individuals and support them.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think from the startup world, in the large company world, there are some companies that do a very good job of providing support and being supportive. On the startup side, I think it can be a little bit more of a crapshoot. It's a small group, and what you end up with is what you end up with. And there's one startup where I remember I was there for 2.5 years before I saw one other woman in the actual startup. So it can be really challenging, but I'm hopeful that there would be groups formed perhaps across different companies that help people with support within, because by definition, a startup is a fairly small group. And so it kind of has a certain aspect to it.
Thank you, Milan. Yeah, there's a couple of cool things going on over here in Southern California. Women in Bio is very active, like Alyssa said. And we also have Healthcare Businesswomen's Association. Both of them are adding a startup tier to try and give access to their programming and their networks and their offerings to companies that are startups, right? So it's a very nominal fee to get into the network. So yeah, I'd like to see more of that too. I think startups don't have the money to pay for a chief people officer or HR necessarily, right? And so what are the best practices even in the small entities, and how can we get those going like from day one? So Thank you so much. Okay, we have a couple really cool questions here. And this goes back to some of the stuff that I think we're here to talk about, right? What are some of the ways that we can compare and contrast working in industry versus academia? So I don't know, I think, Alyssa, I think this is you. Yeah, and then we'll circle it back to people and Milan, and then we'll circle it back to people in academia and see kind of what the interplay looks like.
Well, I'll just, I think, the definition of industry can be different for different people. So for example, I work at a financial institution, right? Like I work at an investor, which I consider industry, but I think, potentially if you guys are asking about bench science and industry, that's going to be quite different. But from my experience from bench science and industry, I would say, the projects are going to probably be quite different. Typically, and not always, but in industry, you are trying to create some sort of translational, product, whether it be in engineering or in the medical area. When I was working in industry, I was trying to improve the formulation of biologics so that certain drugs could be administered more conveniently to patients. So it was much less focused on sort of, fundamental like biology, what are these pathways that are leading to X, Y, and Z, and more taking some of that basic research that I learned from, all of our colleagues or, all of our counterparts in academia, and then applying it to real world problems. So I think, I obviously have never run a lab in academia, but I would say, in industry, it's definitely much more focused on solving these, problems that are going to be basically translatable to I don't want to make it sound bad, but like money-making enterprises, right? Like basically you're creating these companies so that you can build products or drugs that can then be kind of utilized by the rest of the world. And hopefully they're great products that make people's lives much better. So that's how I mean, Milan, I guess you could probably add more about your industry and things that you guys are working on.
Sure. So yeah, I would say a couple things. One is just that there hasn't been a time where I haven't been grateful that getting a PhD helps you with the mindset of problem solving in whatever situation you find yourself in. And so there's that aspect. And then within industry, I've encountered kind of three types of situations. One is where you working in a research lab in a large company. And I think, that may be perhaps most like academia, where you're really, allowed to work on a problem and for the sake of the problem. And there's some connection to business, but it's not as strong as what I'll get to later. And then another type of situation is where you're actually responsible for going out and getting your own funding, like for SBIR and STTR type situations. And that I think is perhaps kind of in between, where you're actually going out there and looking for funding for a particular project. And then within a really focused startup, I'd say that, all of your work that you're doing, if it's science or engineering related, is just very accelerated, and it's very determined by the end business result. So those are the kind of three experiences that I've had. But I wanted to preface it by saying that, graduate school in general has helped with every problem solving situation that I've been in. So that's been really good.
Thank you. Susanna or Kathy, do you have any, Leah, do you have any perspective on industry? Do you have anything to say about it? Anything you want to tell your younger self or academia? I mean, I think the familiar space, or the more familiar space for probably our audience is academia. So comment how you will. I will not frame it for you.
Well, I will say that I do a lot of collaborative projects with industry. So I work closely with people in industry. And from my perspective, one big difference is this sense of hierarchy. So the people I work with in industry have a boss, and their boss has a boss, and somebody's making decisions, somebody's deciding strategy. The thing about working in academia is that, sorry, Gerardo, my dean is not my boss. I mean, I can really, I feel like I can do what I want to do, and I can set my own agenda. And I actually pinch myself every now and again and think, isn't it amazing that they actually pay me to do this? You know, I just, whatever I feel passionate about doing, I go do it. So on the other hand, the downside is that you never turn this job off, right? It's like, it becomes a passion, and it occupies your thoughts so much of the time. So that's my perception of one key difference.
You sound like a startup founder to me.
I was gonna say, I don't turn it off either.
That's why I keep starting new companies, because I don't like having a boss.
Yeah, I would echo Susanna's comments there. I you know, at certain points in my career, I had opportunities to maybe pivot and go into biotech. But I was, by that point in my career, I was very much, I don't know, kind of taken with the idea of being able to teach and integrate that into my research. I felt that teaching was making me a better researcher, and researching was making me a better teacher. And I kind of, I don't know, sort of decided that I was probably going to make bigger contributions in that role than I would have in biotech. And I also kind of, I did not want to invest in projects to have them taken away from me because they weren't going to make money. And I know that those decisions have to get made in a company, right? And I really, I don't know, the way I do my research, I fall in love with it. And the idea that I might have to just abandon it because it wasn't going to come to fruition. I just didn't want to be in that situation. So for me, that was a deciding factor.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna add one thing, because we're about to wrap it up here. But if I could get anything I wanted out of this particular set of conversations, going to what you said, Alyssa, about, well, if the community doesn't exist, just build it. I am going to dream up a league of extraordinary STEM women. And I think it should be made up of women who are in all aspects of STEM. And I think we should like erase all the boundaries, whether it's ecology, evolution, marine biology, or you can see where I studied, right? NCDB. I did get a PhD in molecular and cellular biology, just didn't study as an undergrad. Or whether it's academia versus industry and all those other, sort of arbitrary dividing lines. I feel like, yeah, this is the type of group I think that could kind of wipe them away. Mm-hmm. So I'll leave that vision, and I believe that we have some sort of closeout protocol.
Thanks very much. I think I'm going to take the liberty of asking one last question of you all, because it's in the chat and it looks like a really good one to me. It's asking about style, right? So what is your style of communication? And this resonates with one of the questions that I saw that was kind of preloaded. It was when our attendees registered, they were able to ask questions. And there was a question in there about, like, how is it that you have to, or how do you feel you have to represent yourself in an academic setting, or in a way that is perhaps acting like a man or acting differently? Mm-hmm. What are the pressures you feel in terms of how you can bring your style and yourself into the meetings or the classroom, or what it might be? I'd like to pose that.
Well, I would echo Susanna again and say you have to be authentic. I think it's the only way to sustain, and to go back to Milan's point on the long game, you have to be yourself, and you have to feel comfortable in your own skin, I think, to have it be a sustainable, thriving experience. And so, yeah.
Maybe putting yourself inches outside of your comfort zone, and then, half a foot and then a foot will maybe help you kind of create your own style. But I think that kind of pushing yourself to be uncomfortable makes you, makes you think about things differently and can help you improve kind of the way that you approach problems or present yourself or whatever. So just kind of make yourself uncomfortable.
I wanted quite a deep comment, I think. I guess in the past few years, something that I had struggled a lot with personally was that sometimes I had a hard time because I realized at some point that how I was perceived was because I was sometimes the only woman in the room. Sometimes I would meet someone for the first time and they would say, "Oh, you're the girl," because that was my primary identity as compared to some of my classmates. And so I had to put in a bit more effort to put myself out there a bit more and emphasize what I could offer other than that quality. And so I think it did make me more passionate about science communication, about education, about communicating what I'm passionate about and all the things I'm interested in, so that I can have just more things to remember for others to remember me by. And I also noticed this disconnect between how I see myself and how others see me. And so definitely that is science communication, I think, is really valuable and has helped me bridge that gap. And also how I first started being interested in computer science was from high school. I taught computer science for 3 summers. So I guess that's another point for science communication and the importance of how much, even in research, how much you can put into communicating your ideas and explaining to others from a general audience to your colleagues.
I would say believe in yourself, have confidence that what you have to say is valuable. Other people will find it valuable and speak up. And if there are issues that you are passionate about, and they can be scientific issues, but they can also be social issues and issues about the workplace and the quality of the interactions that you have with other people, stand up and say it. Just say it. It'll be welcome. And the more confidence you have, and the less you apologize for wanting to say those things, the more impact they will have.
I think I could just add, I agree with all of you, and what Kathy said about being authentic is really important, but it's really hard. And just one silly comment, I've always wished I had a deeper voice, but I don't. So that's something that seems silly, but.
Amber, do you have any final thoughts on that?
I could talk about this for a very long time. I did have an experience recently that I could share. I was given an award by the Graduate Women in Science, which is an organization that I dearly love, and it was an early career award. And they were like, because normally when you are invited to speak or be part of a panel, they're like, okay, you're going to talk about this. And you're like, okay. And they're like, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, And so I was really wanting to contribute and to give back. And so what I did was I spoke about my trajectory through research, but not just the CV, right? Like I added in all the life stuff. So I had these set of photos where it was like, this was my PhD. And that is when I had my first son. And it was amazing and beautiful, wonderful, and really hard for this. And then, where I said like, oh, I'm from Alaska, I was like, I grew up underneath the poverty line in Alaska, so I took the one-dimensionality away and was, in my attempt, trying to be more authentic and kind of strip down some of the barriers between humans. And it was amazing how I got a deluge of young women, and just some young men too, emailing me afterwards about all sorts of things. But it was amazing. And it was, I think, an evolution in my communication. Can I continue to participate in the academic and the industry realms at a level that I want to get to do the things I want to do. Remember, I don't like bosses. And can I push myself to bring a little more authenticity each day, and with the goal of not putting things on people that will make you uncomfortable, but being more vulnerable. So that's something I'm playing around with right now.
Can't tell you how much I appreciate all your responses there. And I will say though, they completely resonate with what I was looking at, and Kathy can attest to this in the applications, the admitted students that we're bringing into CCS, is that folks are not, they want to be authentic, but they also want to make change so that their authenticity can be included. So it's about adjusting the institution at the same time as it's finding out who you really are. And I'm hearing that in all of your stories today. And so I can't thank you enough for participating, Amber for coming back and moderating, each of you, Leah coming from across the planet. Thank you all for joining us today. I guess we'll wrap our third CCS Lounge, and hope you have a good night.